Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session titled Teaching Learners to Use AI Ethically and Appropriately in the Online English Classroom. I am Dr. Kathleen Tate, the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Online Learning, Research and Practice and Department Chair of Teaching and Professor at American Public University System, and will be the chair of this session. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone to please mute your microphones to avoid background noise. If you have questions for the presenter, please type them in the chat box and we'll address them. Actually, throughout the session, you'll have the option to go on your microphone and ask the question, or I can just read the question. Now, it is an honor to introduce presenter Dr. Jacqueline Fowler. Jackie?
Thank you, Dr. Tate. And hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. So you might be wondering why I chose the online English classroom. Well, it's because it's what I know. But I think whatever I talk about here will be appropriate to any classroom. Of course, you need to adapt it to your own content. But this is just to show you what we're doing in English. And now, just so you know a little bit about the English department. In general, English departments are not very techy. But I happen to be in an English department that's pretty digitally savvy. And we've gotten that way because of the way we do our curriculum. So for instance, I'm going to just give you one example of one of the many ways we use technology in our curriculum. Most of you have probably read the Odyssey, or maybe you were supposed to read the Odyssey and maybe didn't. But we teach the Odyssey in, of course, the English department. And one of our professors, Professor Wolfgang, came up with a really cool idea to make it more real. So she figured out how to use Google Maps to actually trace Odysseus's journey through the Greek Isles. And she made it very interactive so that students could get on and get a full idea of what it's like to travel from one place to the other, and to understand how places relate to each other and how cultures relate and the look of the language. So while we think that Shakespeare, for instance, is kind of modern, and we embrace technology in our department. So you'll see as I go on that it's something that we're connected to. It's something that we're not afraid of in the English department. But like any good English professor, I'm going to start with the story. And the story is about Emily Bronte's book, Wuthering Heights. You may not have read it, but you probably saw some version of the movie. But I'm not going to tell you about the story. I'm going to tell you about a group of unknown Turkish researchers. Now, you might think, Turkish researchers, unknown. I mean, they're literally unknown. And I'll explain that in a few minutes. And while I read the cover of the book and it says one of the world's great literary masterpieces, I'm sure it's appreciated in Turkey, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not one of the great literary masterpieces of Turkey. So the unknown Turkish researchers had written extensively about Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. And yet when we looked for them in their credentialed university, or they were not existing. Okay, so remember that. And I also know that as an English teacher, I'm at an AI conference. So of course, the story will have a little bit of AI in it as well. And here's what happened. In January of 2023, January, I got a panicked phone call from a faculty member. She said, I'm sending you a paper written for a basic literature course. I want you to read it and then call me back. And so I read the paper, and it was weirdly intellectual without making sense. It felt more like a graduate level paper, maybe even doctorate level paper, but without the connections in the ideas that would make it make sense. And I can't say it was poorly written, but it was also not really well written. And what I noticed is that it had no coherence. In other words, ideas didn't lead to the next idea. They kind of were stuck in and left. And there were no transitions between sentences and no transitions between paragraphs. So the flow of the writing was off, and it was kind of hard to make sense of it. And then I got to the very last page. And what I noticed was the reference list, which was quite lengthy for a beginning literature class, was all Turkish. So all of the researchers who had done this research were from Turkey. And again, not saying that Turkish writers wouldn't be interested in looking at Emily Bronte's work, but I found that a little bit odd that it was all Turkish authors and no native English speakers. So I called the student. And when I asked the student whether or not he spoke Turkish, I could tell by the way there was a pause on the phone that he couldn't understand where I was going. And it came out that he had used AI to generate the paper. He couldn't answer any questions because he had only spent a couple of seconds generating the prompt and he never read the paper. And it was our first foray with AI. And that was in January of 2023. But within hours, days, and over the next few weeks, we were getting inundated with AI in the English department. So we knew we had to make an all of department response, right? There was no policy yet in the university, but we had to do something in English. It was a deluge of papers coming in that were AI generated, completely AI generated. And one of the things we knew as we began the process of creating our response to it is that we knew we needed to create a next gen model. So in other words, if we were creating a model just to address right now the AI issue, it wouldn't be a very good model. It wouldn't have lasting power. It wouldn't, we'd be changing it in a couple of weeks, couple of months as AI grew. And so we really had to consider what it was, how we were going to integrate this new technology into our program in a way that benefited the students and didn't hamper the teachers' work, the faculty's work. And one of the things we did is we started to do some research. And what we knew, oops, I'm sorry, I went too far there. Hang on. Let me go back up. What we knew is that there was information on creating a next gen model that helped us put our work into perspective. And the first was we had to do some research on the competition. What was out there in English departments and how were they handling AI? Now, I know that sounds really funny, but we all know in our own departments, right, that there are ways that we have to create our program so that it's not a negative standout from all the other programs. Our students apply for master's degrees, they go to graduate school, they use their work. So for instance, one of the things that we know in English is that you can't graduate from an English department unless you have at least one class of Shakespeare and you have to take linguistics, right? So we know that, and to fit within the best programs, we have to do our best at that. And so we looked outside to see what was happening with AI in the other universities. And there is a university, a competitor that we have now, and it gets around what happens if you don't deal with these issues. And now we know negatively that they're not really dealing with AI. And I won't say who it is, but we hear the scoops, and it's not favorable. We also had to deal with student expectations. And what I mean by that is that we have to understand that students come to the university for a number of reasons, but our job at the university is to find that one topic that they'll fall in love with, that one topic that they'll spend the rest of their time at the university pursuing. And that's the way we create persistence in students. And this comes from a gentleman named Dr. Light from Harvard University Graduate School of Education. And he says, not only do you have to find that one topic, you have to help students find that one topic they fall in love with. You also have to do it through a mentor. So you have to help them connect to and feel cared by at least one mentor or adult on the campus. And that includes a virtual campus. And so, so we took that into consideration as we were building, and we realized that one of the things that we had to do is we had to teach how to use AI appropriately and ethically, which meant, of course, that we had to teach ourselves about AI. So let me go back. So in the beginning, in January of 2023, in this new world, we weren't sure how to handle it. And like most good English teachers, we wanted to, bury our head in the sand and pretend it wasn't happening. So we had to find ways to address faculty concerns. And one of the things that we've been working at in the university, this is from Anderson, is that great universities have a culture of continuous improvement and a willingness to innovate. And because in the English department, we had built this curriculum that we continued to work on, it was working on our teaching and our curriculum at the same time. We had created this culture of continuous improvement. So adding AI to it was a little scary, but we were willing to innovate. We had shown that we were happy to innovate. And so it was one of those things that came naturally to us, not AI, but the ability to incorporate it in a different way into our classroom. And so one of the first things that I realized would help faculty is for them to see how AI could help them, right, in their own pursuits. And so I research an Irish poet named William Butler Yeats, and I want to know, I write about how his words influenced the Republican movement in the early 20th century Ireland. It's not a topic you read about every day, right? And it's kind of a new topic because it moves outside of his words to see his effect in society. It actually brought Irish freedom. Now, it's really hard to find good resources on it. So one of the things I did is I went to ChatGPT and I asked, please find peer-reviewed articles on William Butler Yeats's influence on the Republican movement in early 20th century Ireland. And right away, it spit out a number of really strong, really good resources, things that I would search a long time in a library database to find, I found within a number of seconds. And so one of the things we did as faculty is we figured out how could we use this ourselves, and then how can that translate into the classroom? And this is one way we did it. And you'll see later on, we used something like this in the classroom. This literally took me about 3.5 seconds to find this, to generate this list. And it occurs to me that I will never do research the way I used to do it, right? I will always start this way. Okay, so we've gone from, oops, lost. So we've gone from student expectations to faculty expectations and to competition. And that's where we really felt they were department level concerns. There are university level concerns like infrastructure, which includes how we use AI and also the tools to help us use AI, and also the money. And so that had to come later for us. We had to build that in later. The first 3 we could take care of in English. And then after that, we would take care of the others. And so once we did this initial work, we knew that to change a culture, which is what we had been doing in English through our curriculum process, we needed to provide permission structures first. A permission structure is what you're allowed to do with AI. So we figured out what is it that we're going to allow students to do with AI, what will enhance their education, what will enhance their learning. And we had to figure it out quickly because we were getting hit by AI papers. So we built permission structures, and then we created consequences for being outside of the permissible boundaries. Both of these are teaching, right? So the permission structures is we're teaching how to use it appropriately for the English classroom, and the creating consequences for being outside of permissible boundaries is the ethical way. Right? So there's where we get the 2 words, appropriately and ethically. And of course, we define them in the department differently than somebody else might define them. So that's up to the department to decide what their appropriate and ethical is in their choice. So we knew we had to create permission structures, and we knew we had to create consequences, and we had to do it quickly. And so we workshopped an all department response. And the first thing, this is just a small piece of it, but the first thing we recognized is that in academic discourse, the writing is a distillation of research, right? We go outside, we find information on a particular topic, and we put it together in a new and innovative way. A majority of the work, and we use 80 to 85% kind of as a standard, because, and that takes into consideration the works cited page, everything. So you can see not a whole lot of direct quotes, right? This is for my friends in psychology, so that you know that we're not saying, 15% could be direct quotes. No. So they must be written in their own words, and mostly through paraphrasing of outside sources. And what we decided was one of the first ways we could incorporate AI into the department was by using it as a kind of pre-writing prompt. So brainstorming, free writing, finding research, understanding how things connect by generating a mind map, for instance. That was all something that really worked in English, at least in the beginning. Now we've expanded it since then. We've tweaked it. But in the beginning, it seemed like a really good way of doing it. And the consequence for going outside the permissible boundary, right, was that you just need to rewrite your paper. So if we get a paper that's 100% AI generated, rewrite, no penalty, right? You have to rewrite it by the end of the semester, by the end of the course, but you can rewrite it without a penalty. That was our consequence. And it really works, really works. As students got savvier and the tools got better, we recognized that we needed an extra piece. So sometimes we were seeing 30%, 35%, 40% AI generation, and we realized it was from Grammarly-like tools, right? So students were using it appropriately to go in and make sure that their grammar was correct, and that's great. But what Grammarly-like tools do with AI now is they rewrite sentence structure. So it does come up as AI generated. And so I was thinking, well, how could we do this? How can we okay the use of Grammarly AI generated tools in the English classroom? And it occurred to me, it's no different from English professors putting comments on a paper, right? So we put comments on a paper. Here's one that I know off the top of my head because I use it so regularly. This is a run-on sentence. A run-on sentence occurs when there's two or more complete sentences smashed together without the correct punctuation and or connecting word. And then I show the student how to correct it in the piece that I'm grading. And then my next piece of advice says, please go through your paper and make sure that you found and corrected all the run-on sentences because it affects meaning. Well, that's no different than what Grammarly does up front, right? It identifies something, it tells you why it's wrong, it makes the correction, and then you move on. If students select accept, or they select accept all, some programs allowed you to accept all of the recommendations, then there's a high level of AI generation. And more importantly, many of our students won't read those comments or won't read why it's being changed. And so we say, you're more than welcome to go out and use AI Gen in a Grammarly-like program. But instead of accepting the comment or accepting all, you need to read it, understand it, and do it yourself. And so it's a learning opportunity, right? So there it is. The feedback is given automatically even before they turn it into the professor. And as long as they're reading the feedback and applying it themselves, they're learning and they're not generating an AI score. So that's another way we handled it in English. One of the things we decided to do was to add AI tools. We wanted to teach, again, the permission structures. We wanted to teach it inside our courses. And so one of the things we needed to do as a faculty is we needed to consider the impacts, pro and con, of using the new technology. And AI is just one tool. We do this with all of technology. How does it impact the learner? How does it impact the faculty member? How does it impact learning? And how does it impact society? So we've all seen these great new and brilliant tech tools like social media, right? But we have the opposite of it's all good until you know about the algorithms that are pumped out to young girls. Or if anyone's been to Dubai, you've gone through the airport. It's the easiest airport to go through because it uses facial recognition software. So you don't have to stand in line for a passport. But you know what? You're also often misidentified and held in until they can find out if you're the person who robbed a bank somewhere else. So there's pros and cons too. Yes, Kathleen.
Jackie, we have a question that you might want to answer. Does Leanne want to go on the microphone and ask it, or I can go ahead and read it? Daniel will give the option to speak.
Leanne is asking to please read it.
Okay, no problem. So regarding the recommendations for Grammarly type tools, were students willing to not default to quote unquote accept all?
Well, that's a great question, Leanne. So the issue is if they don't, if it comes up with 40% AI generation, for instance, we ask them to rewrite the sentences, right? So we explain it to them. When we do these policies, we send it to students. We put it in announcements for each class. We put it in our policies for each class. We put it in the discussions. We show it over and over again to socialize it. That's for you, Karen Gallivan, to socialize it with our students so that they know we're serious about this, and then we hold them accountable. So there are times when students try not to do that, but I think it's working. It takes a little time. We're changing a culture. But so far, so good. I hope that answered. If not, ask again. So one of the things we learned from research about the impacts of AI in specifically the English classroom is Oldham has said that AI can significantly increase academic dishonesty. Well, we knew that from the Emily Bronte story, right? The student took a couple of seconds to generate a prompt and the whole paper. But the other thing that we've learned in Oldham's work is that using it appropriately and ethically can actually increase the creativity in writing. Because one of the things that we need to do with AI is expand our definition of text. And the English department about 5 years ago decided to change the program. And instead of saying literature, which of course is part of text, we've expanded it to film, to media, to social media, to pictures, to moving objects, right? So text has expanded already in English. And so that's one way AI can help. It can help curate those things and expand the creativity in writing. Of course we want that, right? The more creativity there is, even in academic writing, the less boring it is. And so we want to have AI to help with that. It also prepares, one of the things we've noticed in the research is it prepares the students for the workplace. So if you come out of a program knowing how to use AI ethically and appropriately in your writing, then you're one step ahead of most people in the workplace. And so it's a good thing for our students to teach them. So this is how we think about the implications, the impacts of the new technology. Now let me show you how we put it into the classroom. Oh, Kathleen, you want to go first and then?
Yes, that'd be great. There's another question. Have students used AI to create a colorful title for their paper, such as when they might be reviewing Old Man and the Sea?
Oh, I bet you that's Oliver right there. So I would say yes. And actually that's not a bad thing to do. Now, what we teach is that if you generate a title with AI, try and make it your own, right? So that's somebody else's title or an amalgamation of somebody else's title, but you can take that idea and run with it. And that's a great way of using it. So yeah, like I don't see a problem with generating a title as long as it's not absently, used without relating it to the paper. It needs to relate to the paper, to the themes in the paper, to the thesis statement. But yes, of course, that's a great way of using it. Here's another way. This is how we put it into our biggest English class. It's a composition class. Last year, we taught about 9,000 students. And this is just one part of the discussion question assignment rules. Okay, so you'll notice the first thing we do, and this goes back to the prior question, we always link in a policy. Read the policy on AI, read the policy on plagiarism, right? Like we want you to know before you start this DQ or this assignment, we're going to ask you to use AI, but we want you to be aware of how to use it ethically and appropriately. And then we're going to teach you how to use it in this discussion question. So the first thing we do is we ask them to go to the research guide in the library for their particular discipline. And then after they have some notes from the library research guide, then we ask them to use an AI tool. And we ask them to put in the prompt. For instance, somebody from sports medicine, how do people in the sports medicine field write? Or if you're from logistics, how do people in the sports or in logistics field write? Or how do people in the English field write? And we ask them to cut and paste what they get from the AI post directly into their DQ. And then the next part is the teaching part. We ask them to take a look at the two different sources they used and to draw not only conclusions from them, but also what's similar and what's different, and where do you think you learned more from, and how did they benefit each other? So we're teaching them how to look at it critically, right? Later on, this same prompt comes back into an assignment, and we use it in an assignment in a different way. And so it's one of the ways that we are teaching, not just ourselves, because we had to figure out how to grade it, but also students how to use it appropriately. Here's another way. In week 4, the DQs, we ask students to read an article. The artificial intelligence is changing writing at the university. Let's embrace it. And then they can respond to one of 4 threads. They can be the skeptic who challenges the author. They can be the reflector, thinks about how does it apply to me. They can be the validator who supports the author, or they could be the extender who takes the author's ideas and moves it into the future. And one of the things we find from this DQ is that we as faculty learn as much from the students as they learn from each other. And what's interesting about this one is we all read the same article. We're all responding to the same issues. But this one in particular, when I've taught it, I've walked away with ideas from students that I can then take and incorporate into our use of AI, either as our guidelines or in our classrooms. So this is a really great way of teaching them how to use AI. Yes, Kathleen.
Okay, we have 2 questions. One I think has been answered, but before you started this topic, someone wrote, I like all of your recommendations. Have you or other teachers approached the school about all the additional work that teachers now spend on reviewing and teaching AI? If so, what was the response?
Yeah, we have. I actually sit on the AI committee with the Associate Provost, Steve Ernst, and we've raised these issues within the committee a lot. And I would say it's such a new technology. It's such a new tool. We're learning our way through it, right? So for instance, we now have the permission structures, right? Like that's come out of our committee, and everybody was socialized on it a few weeks ago. We had to, finish the quiz and everything like that. And I think that we're all waiting for the next step because it is additional work for the faculty. It's a lot of additional work. And the AI detection tools aren't 100%. So we have to do a little legwork. So I do a lot of legwork with students. But what we found in English is even though there's more work, it's probably less work than if we had not addressed it at all. And I don't know if that helps at all. I hope that helps. Yeah, we're ready for the next. Okay, I'm not sure which link I pressed already, so I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to go to the next one. Yep.
And another question is, since you addressed the forms, because that was a previous question, where is this information kind of introduced, or where does it reside in the class? So follow-up is, can we have those forms, a copy, and use in our other non-English classes? That's from Oliver.
Yeah, sure you can. You can have like anything that I introduced today, you're welcome to have. It won't work as well. Like we're really specific to the English classroom, but you can take the idea and run with it. And I'm happy to share that with you, Oliver, 100%. The second thing we had to talk about as an English faculty is how do we adapt this new tool, this in particular AI now, for learning, right? Well, we have to do that for all new tools, but now it's for AI. And we had to consider again, how does it affect learning? How does it affect the learner, the faculty? The prior question about how does it increase the faculty's workload? Yeah, that it does increase the faculty's workload for sure. How are we going to minimize that impact on faculty? And how does the new tool affect society? And I know that sounds like a big, broad issue, but students need to know how to write. They need to articulate their ideas in speech and writing. And so if we're sending them out into the world using AI without knowing how to articulate on their own, like they need the tool, we're not doing our job. And conversely, if we're sending them out in the world without knowing how to use AI to help generate ideas, to articulate their ideas, then we're not doing our job. So we have to adapt. And one of my favorite adaptations, you wouldn't think that you could adapt AI for a literature classroom. But in fact, Intro to Literature does this incredible, really cool assignment. So the students take a week 2 short story essay. So it's a lot of famous short stories. And they don't get to choose their short stories. It's chosen for them based on the quiz. And what that does is it broadens the amount of stories that they address in the classroom. Okay. And then they read the AI version of that story. So for instance, one of the stories is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. You know, the one, Rip Van Winkle who sleeps for 20 years, right? By Washington Irving. And so they go out. If you were given The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, you go out and read the AI version of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now we've done it for them, so it's linked right here in the directions for the assignment. And you're supposed to think about the theme that's being advanced in the AI version. Now, by this point, they know theme, they know dialogue, they understand the basic of analyzing literature. So this all works. And then they have to read the original, the one actually by Washington Irving. And they have to decide that what they write about is which one is better. And notice we've given them permission in here. It's okay if you think the AI version has a stronger theme, right? But what we're doing is we're having them compare both. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. This is the AI version of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, like the first half of it, okay? And you can see, you don't have to read it all, you don't have to look at it all, but I'm just gonna read the very first paragraph. In the quaint village of Sleepy Hollow, nestled within the Catskill Mountains, lived a man named Rip Van Winkle. Rip was a friendly and good-natured soul, but he was also known for his aversion to work and responsibility. His days were often spent idly wandering through the woods and listening to the stories shared by the villagers. All good so far, right? It sounds like The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now, let me show you the original version. In the first 3 paragraphs, we don't even hear about Rip Van Winkle. The author is setting the scene. This is where this takes place. And he's trying to give you that spooky feeling of being there. Like he's setting it all, right? He's setting it all. And what we find from students is that they recognize it. So they can say, for instance, well, in the AI version, they tell us that Rip Van Winkle was friendly and good-natured and that he didn't like to work and he didn't like responsibility. But in the original version by Washington Irving, we see that. So Washington Irving spends a good deal of time showing us the idea that Rip Van Winkle is maybe lazy, but good-natured, right? So he does a lot of work. So they recognize that and they like it better in the original. They may not want to read the whole thing. They also notice that the setting is missing in the AI version. They notice that the story is kind of dry, right? And it's not connected. There's no cohesion or transitions. And so it works really well to get them to understand what AI is good for, summary, and then what the original human content is worth. There's a more creativity built into the Rip Van Winkle story by the author. Kathleen.
Jackie, we have a couple questions. Here's the first one. Do you experience any issues with students using AI to generate the which do you like comparison?
Can you ask that question again?
Sure. Do you experience any issues with students using AI to generate the quote unquote, which do you like comparison?
No, because we give them the AI version. We have it linked into the discussion question. And it's okay if they like the AI version because it's quicker and shorter and that's great. But you know what? They have to support the theme and the thesis of the original. And most students by this point recognize, oh, well, it might be shorter, but it doesn't really use the themes as well. So I hope that that's what you mean.
And another question from Oliver. Can you ask AI to rewrite that short story in some style, such as Ernest
Yes.
Hemingway might rewrite, or do you just use AI to rewrite it?
No, and in fact, in English U10, the next step is that they ask AI to generate one, you know, without a main character or without, like for instance, in one student did it without Rip Van Winkle's wife, which doesn't really make sense because she's the reason he goes away, right? He falls asleep because he's getting away from her. So yeah, you can take this to the next level. And also, folks, it's not just creative writing. You can do it in adapting academic work. So in English 221, which is science writing, we have the same kind of idea. Let me show you the link. Oops, wait, hang on, I gotta go back. Okay, so here's the original, the impact of campus-based therapy dogs on the mood and affect of students. And here is this is the ChatGPT summary of the whole paper, right? So you can see. And what we do in this is we say to students, okay, look at both of them. And then we give them a series of questions. This is the teaching part. Are there differences between the two? What one is better? Where did you learn more from? The AI generated one or the other one? Is the writing style different? Do they both contain rhetorical techniques? So like we're teaching them what to look for. Is the ChatGPT article peer reviewed? Think about that a few seconds. It's not as easy as you think. And so here we go with creating something that helps teach it. But you could take this to the next level, and English 221 does. So one of the things we decided to do was we decided to use, when we were teaching the methods and materials section, we asked it to summarize, students to go out and summarize the materials and methods section of the article. Now, the article we chose is fairly difficult, and it had 3 pages of double-spaced methods and materials section, okay? Here's what it looks like. It looks like this. So 3 pages, double columned. This is it. And then we say to the students, do us a favor, go back in, see what's missing in the ChatGPT version. And did it help you understand the full methods and materials section once you had a summary of it? Like, did the summary kind of get you ready? Did it set the cognitive playing field for reading a full methods and materials section? And actually, I have to say, it helped me, right? So it's another way of using it. And then let me I'm going to wrap up now. You can start small. Like for instance, in English 101, which is another of our big courses, we ask them to just go out. We give them the permission structure. Go out to ChatGPT and type a question into Sites Chat. Find peer-reviewed articles on the topic of being kind to another. And they use that as a way of beginning the pre-writing stage. That's an easy one you could build in, right? We could build into the course content. You could build it into an assignment or a discussion question. So here's what I'm going to say to you. Build permission structures, provide consequences. Make sure that the permission structures are able to be taught by your faculty. You cannot have something that will overwhelm the faculty or it won't happen. And then everybody needs to enforce the consequence. Then don't think about what's good for today, responding to today. Think about what will have staying power. So build a next gen model and be willing to adapt it, right? So this is constant. We're always adapting. Listen to ideas and experiences. And you'll remember I told you about the student ideas that I get from the week 4 discussion in English 110. Come up with really great ideas, and we use those to adapt our policy or our guidelines and the ways of teaching, right? Same with faculty. They're going to have ideas too. And then be willing to make mistakes, because that's what it's all about. We're going to make mistakes with this, but the more we work with it, the better we become with it, and the easier it is to teach it ethically and appropriately. And it is a benefit to our students to go out into the world knowing this. That's what I got. Any questions?
Jackie, this is an excellent presentation. We'll give everyone just a moment to see if there are any questions. Let's see. I know people are really excited about these ideas, and thank you for sharing. I
Oh,
think
Michelle says it makes it seem easy. It is not, Michelle. If that's what it seemed like, it is not. Some of us have been taken kicking and screaming into this new age. So yes, no, please don't trust your faculty, trust your students, make mistakes.
And what's really nice is that these things can apply to other disciplines. It's not just, married to the English classroom. So great ideas. We really thank everyone for attending and your interaction, your questions. We thank you again, Dr. Jacqueline Fowler. This is a good time for, well, I guess it's a big break because we don't reconvene until tomorrow morning, where we'll have another keynote from MIT, Lori Glover, JD. So I hope you all are enjoying the conference, and goodbye and good luck. Take care.